Today is the 2nd of August, 2014, and this is episode 132. This program is intended for informational and educational purposes only. Cryptocurrency is a new field of study. Consult your local futurist, lawyer, and investment advisor before making any decisions whatsoever for yourself. Welcome to Let's Talk Bitcoin, a twice-weekly show about the ideas, people, and projects building the digital economy and the future of money. My name is Adam B. Levine, and I'm here along with the other hosts of Let's Talk Bitcoin, Stephanie Murphy.
Hello.
And Andreas M. Antonopoulos.
Hey, everyone.
On today's episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin, we're joined by Alan Reiner, founder and CEO at the open source Armory wallet. Alan, how are you?
Good day, Adam.
Before we get into it, it's been a while since we've actually had you on to talk about Armory Wallet. Can you give listeners who maybe didn't hear those earlier interviews kind of like the 60-second elevator pitch? What's the value behind Armory? Who's it for?
Armory is an advanced tool for Bitcoin wallet management. It's squarely focused on the security side, not so much the ease of use side. It is one of the earliest alternative wallets that came out. You know, we started back in 2011 before most people even knew what Bitcoin was. And it's one of the 5 featured desktop wallets on bitcoin.org. And it's in the category of do-it-yourself wallets, much like the core Bitcoin client, Electrum, Multibit, in that you have full control of your keys. And it respects kind of the goal of Bitcoin from the start, which was enabling the user full control over their finances, exploiting all the fantastic benefits of the Bitcoin network. The difference between Armory and the rest is that we have focused very much on the secure side of things, and we want to provide a tool for the power users and the corporate users to manage very large quantities of money.
Alan, I have to say, I've been an Armory user for quite a while now, and you said it's not really focused on ease of use, but I don't find it difficult to use. I don't think it's really, hard to use or anything.
There's a rather significant barrier to entry. Getting set up with Bitcoin Core, downloading the blockchain, throws off a lot of users, uses a lot of disk space. I agree that once you're set up, I think we've made the features that it has very easy to use, but it's still not something I would recommend to absolute newbies to the Bitcoin space. The plethora of features and options can be a little overwhelming, and just that barrier to entry can be a bit much. But I do agree that once you're set up with Armory and you have a bit of understanding of what's going on, I've tried hard to make these very advanced features as easy to use as they can be.
It's been about 6 months since we've spoken with you about this topic. There's been a lot of development that's been going on. Can you kind of catch us up on what you guys have been through and what the priorities have been over the last 6 months?
So I think last time we talked, I had just started the company, Armory Technologies Incorporated. Before that, Armory was a personal project of mine. And since then, we've hired 4 new developers, and we have a couple other participants helping out with the organization. Our focus has kind of evolved from a general purpose tool. It's still a very general purpose tool, but it's evolved from regular users, where we've been focusing on trying to get regular users as easy as possible into Armory, and recognize that there's a lot of demand from the corporate side and enterprise side. These companies that are managing large amounts of money, and they need the tools to do so as securely as possible. We focused our efforts a bit more on that side and providing value to them. For instance, we had some ideas for doing, a light version of the wallet, an Android app. What we found is that we have a very high number of enterprise users for whom that's not really the important part of it. What they want is more multisig features, better encryption options, backup options, segregation of duties, stuff like that. And so while Armory is open source, anyone can go download and use it. I think our focus is becoming more and more on that. We've made offline wallets. I didn't mention it earlier, but offline wallets are kind of our claim to fame. Armory was probably the first one to make a nice intuitive interface. And now we have generic multisig that allows you to do anything up to 7 of 7. And we're focusing our efforts on helping organizations figure out how to use these features and leverage them so that they can protect themselves and not end up in more Gox-style disasters.
There was a fragmented backup feature where you could create a backup of your wallet basically and distribute it in multiple pieces, and it could be reconstructed from some number of those pieces, which was really handy. How is the implementation of multisig different than that? What are some of the things that someone might do with each one of those?
The fragmented backup is something that we made about a year ago. The feature, the ability to take your single signature wallet and create a backup such that the backup itself is not a single point of failure. Before that, and with most other applications, you make a backup and you have a single sheet of paper that is basically the keys to your kingdom. And while you do need a backup, some people were concerned about the physicals. Now, the backup isn't actually needed to operate your wallet. It's simply, exactly as it's called, a backup in case your computer dies or you forget your password for your wallet. So we made a fragmented backup. The idea that you still have a single signature wallet and the network is still expecting a single signature, but you've removed the physical single point of failure when you make a backup by creating, say, a 3 of 5 backup and you have 5 pieces that you can move around, distribute to safe deposit boxes, bury them in your backyard, give them to family members, whatever that may be. But again, the backup, a measure when things go wrong. The network, there's still a single key that you need to move money. And that still technically represents a single point of failure, but you haven't added one with the backup. Now with the new multisig features, what we've done is we've actually made the ability for multiple devices to be required to sign in order to move money. And so it does sound very similar. The difference is what the network sees. When you create a 3 of 5 lockbox, the network actually contains 5 public keys, and all the nodes on the network are going to check. They're going to check that 3 of the signatures exist or a transaction is considered valid. So for normal operations, when you use a lockbox, you're going to have to actually visit 3 of those 5 devices or receive signatures from 3 of 5 participants. Whether we're talking about, board of directors each having a signing authority over it, or you're talking about 5 devices that you've spread out and kept, geographically separate somehow. So the backup features just give you a way to back up a single signature, but you still have a single signature wallet. Whereas the multisig lockboxes actually let you split that signing authority across and require accessing a certain number of them every time you want to execute a transaction.
I understand there's also a fundamental difference in security in those two models. In reconstructing a key that has been split through either the scheme you use or a more generic like Shamir's secret sharing scheme.
We do use Shamir's secret sharing, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So wrapped with a beautiful GUI to hide the fact that that's what you're using. When you want to execute a transaction, you have to bring all of those parts of the key together and reconstruct them on a single system. And that creates an obvious vulnerability because that system has to be absolutely secure. And you've just reconstructed that key, which kind of creates a bit of a problem. Also, when you create that key in the first place, that key is created in a single place before it's split. So at 2 moments in time, that key existed in a single place where it's potentially possible to expose it. Now, the beauty of multisig is that each signature is executed separately. The private keys and public keys that are generated for those signatures are separately generated and can remain separate. When you need to do a transaction, the keys don't have to come together. Only the signatures need to be positioned in sequence on the transaction, and those can be done independently and asynchronously. No key is ever reconstructed. You just exchange signed transactions over the network, which means a lot less opportunity to compromise more than one of those keys.
So if I was going to summarize this simply, it sounds like with a fragmented backup, really what we're talking about is a split key. And with multisig, what we're talking about is multiple keys.
Exactly.
And if you really want to, you can actually use Armory to create a multisig lockbox and then create fragmented backups of each of the signing keys. If you really want to blow your mind, you can do that. Although some people might find that a bit excessive. But it is possible, and it can be done with Armory.
One example of exactly that, when you're doing estate planning and trying to plan for survivorship of the digital assets, you might have, for example, the classic conflict that people have today is that you have to keep your keys secret. But if you keep them secret and something happens to you, what does your family do about your Bitcoin? Well, they can't get to them, right? So that's a big problem at the moment in the Bitcoin space. So the solution to that is to keep your Bitcoin in a multi-signature lockbox, and to leave the possibility of someone being able to access that by signing transactions after your death or during incapacity by reconstructing that key. And if you have a lawyer participating in that scheme, for example, your estate planner, or digital executor, as they're called, then that lawyer will have to protect those extra keys very carefully. They might then use a split key scheme to put part of that key in a safe, part of that key in a safe deposit box, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where you would have a combination of both multi-sig as well as split keys.
For our own use case, we are not currently using combined multi-sig and fragmented backups. What we've done is we've basically replaced fragmented backups with the multi-sig. So before, where you had one key, but you've split it into 5 pieces, we now just have 5 signers, which are members of our organization, to protect that money. And if you lose 2 of them, you still have the capability to move the money. And you can even do things like asymmetric signing, where me, for instance, as the CEO, if it's a 3 of 5, I might have 2 signatures. So the other 3 participants, so the 3 participants alone are enough to move the money, or the CEO plus 1 more is enough to move the money. We exploit this for our operations, a couple tiers of multi-signature funds. The most regular one that we use is simply our petty cash account, where it's just me and our COO who have keys, and then another backup key in case one of us loses one of ours. And it's really for handling, day-to-day operations. And it does actually provide, once you are familiar with the multi-sig interface in Armory, it is very simple. He will create the transaction and add 1 signature to it. This is a 2 of 3, by the way. So it's me, him, and a backup signing key. He will create the transaction and he will sign it, and then he will send it to me, as well as a text message verifying the address that the key, that the money should be going to. I can review it and make sure that I agree with it. I simply add a signature, which makes it valid, and then I can broadcast it to the network.
So in that situation, who has the backup key?
The backup key is an offline key controlled by the company.
I'm curious, you've been obviously testing out different scenarios in different use cases for multi-sig transactions for a while. Have you encountered any issues with them? I mean, like what you described sounds like kind of the classic multi-sig corporate use for multi-sig Bitcoin wallets. But what issues have you had? Has someone not been available when they needed to send funds, or has there been any issues like that?
Well, I think one of the nice things about multi-sig, and more than just, if you have 2 of 2, 3 of 3, 4 of 4, you do have some fragility in the system, in that, if one of the keys is lost, the money ends up being locked forever. But one of the beauties of multi-signature transactions and fragmented backups, any of these M of N schemes, is that you not only get the extra security of the multiple points, there's no longer a single point of failure. Now someone would have to compromise multiple points in order to take the money, but you also have redundancy. You have the ability that you are requiring multiple signatures, but you don't need all of the signatures. So if some participants are not available, or some devices are not easily accessible, you can set it up beforehand to anticipate what those parameters will be and the availability of the various signers to avoid those issues. As for the company and my personal use, we haven't really experienced any issues with it.
Alan, last time I heard about this, it was still in the alpha stage of development. Would you say that Armory's multi-sig features are ready for production now?
We just posted a beta version to our website perhaps a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. And this is a pre-release. The design of the interfaces, the design of the messaging formats, and how people exchange data, that's all stable, tested, and ready to go. A lot of what we're doing now is just cleaning up the interfaces and making sure that when you click a button, there's no errors or cryptic things going on.
Alan, how long did this take to implement and test in Armory? I know that the capacity for multi-sig transactions has been built into Bitcoin for a while, but it seems like just now is when a lot of multi-sig software is coming out. So what was the process like for building it as a coder?
Well, I can say that I've kind of been fantasizing about implementing this feature for a very long time. And unfortunately, other priorities have come up over the past year. In the meantime, while I've been working on other things, I've kind of in the background been developing the ideas in my mind, thinking about how it would be implemented. And it was actually very satisfying that when I finally decided that I had the time and the priority to go into it, it was very efficient. And I felt like I had a very good grip on not only how to get it done in a usable way, but also a secure way. Like, for instance, the multisig that we implemented is not only very flexible in that you can do 1 of 2 up to 7 of 7, but it works with online and offline devices. And Armory is very familiar with the security issues surrounding offline computers. Offline devices can sign transactions securely without being tricked into signing something they're not intending to sign. It was actually very satisfying because I had all these things brewing for probably a year. And when I finally got into doing it, building all those interfaces and all the message formats and, being able to handle online and offline computers was something that actually came kind of naturally to me. And it probably took me about...
This part of the audio was garbled. Alan says it took him 3 or 4 months to complete the alpha version.
The alpha version of that interface running. And we were very happy with it. As Andreas mentioned, we did release an alpha a couple months ago, and we have since revised it. But the process has been actually more smooth than we expected.
What's your background with respect to computer security? You speak about Bitcoin security. I've seen you speak about that. What did you do before Armory?
So before Armory, I actually worked at a place called Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and they do government Department of Defense contracting. I was actually working on missile defense, which was somehow less interesting than Bitcoin, which is why I moved over here. I was working on missile defense applications, automatic target recognition. It was actually a fantastically interesting field to work in. But over the years, I developed, even before Bitcoin, I had taken grad school classes in cryptography and security, and I was a hobbyist in studying cryptography. I mentioned in my presentations about being an ultra paranoid crypto nerd, and I think that other ultra paranoid crypto nerds know exactly what that means. We're the kind of people who will come up with doomsday scenarios and put on our tinfoil hat and try to come up with the craziest attack vectors that someone could design to steal your data, and then figure out how you would fend against that. That was something that I've been doing as a hobby for many years.
Alan, one of the things that I think is very interesting about Armory's multi-signature implementation is that there's a lot more to multi-signature than just the raw technology, than just the capability within Bitcoin. A lot of it has to do with understanding what's going on and with organizing the workflow around collecting signatures and assigning party essentially to execute a transaction. And there's a lot of security considerations there. Now, I noticed Armory has introduced both some new terminology and some new import-export formats and messages for transporting those message formats in order to make the whole workflow and user experience a lot easier to work with. So I have a couple of questions there. One, are you going to be
standardizing and sharing those?
This is a Bitcoin improvement proposal so that perhaps other interfaces working with multi-signature can implement that stuff. And two, if someone is already using multisig, and I am for some of my accounts as well, is it possible to take existing multi-signature redeem scripts and import them into Armory, into the new interface and workflow system?
About the standardization, we've been asked this question a few times, and all I can say about that is that through the design process, there's a lot of flux, there's a lot of turbulence in figuring out not only what data needs to be transferred, but how to present that to the user and how the users are going to transmit data and what are the attack vectors for someone to manipulate that data in transit, so forth. We've thought about all those things, and there have been design iterations going through the process of developing this interface. And for the design process to be efficient, standardization wasn't really anything we could think about. That's not to say we don't ever. But the fact is that there's a lot of parties kind of independently doing their own thing. And to jump right into standardization before we even know exactly what is being standardized, what all the components are, and handling all the use cases, we basically had to forego that at the beginning. And it's very much like the way Armory and Electrum came up with their own deterministic wallet algorithms. And then, it was a year and a half later that the community got a very good grip on exactly all the different use cases for deterministic wallets and backup features, and made BIP32, which is now the standard HD wallet implementation. But Armory and Electrum went a very long time without And I think that was actually important for innovating in the space, that before you even have a grip on what you're solving, you need the flexibility to not have to seek permission from multiple other parties before you experiment with your design decisions.
That's a very good point. You mentioned HD wallets, which brings up the next question I had for you. Does the multisig implementation in Armory use BIP32 hierarchical deterministic wallets? I know a lot of other multisig implementations try to use HD as well. Does yours?
Armory does not yet. We have a new wallet format that will be using multisig, that will be using the BIP32 standardized wallets. We haven't had it high on our priority list because we already have deterministic wallets, meaning we have 98% of the benefits of using deterministic wallets because we have it. So 98% of the benefits of using HD wallets we already have. So it hasn't been a high priority for us to implement that. But it is probably one of the next things that we do is to implement that, and then Armory will be standardized. Unfortunately, that's the blessing and the curse of, so to say, being first to market, and that we had the first deterministic wallet implementation out there long before BIP32 existed, but now we look like we're behind the times because we haven't implemented it, but we're getting there.
What's the difference between the implementation of deterministic wallets that you use versus BIP32?
The ones that Armory uses creates a chain of, it's called a deterministic wallet because it creates a deterministic chain of addresses, meaning that you can take a single seed. Your wallet basically comprises of a seed, and that seed is plugged through a math equation to generate consecutive keys. So when you generate 1 million addresses with your wallet and then you lose your wallet, as long as you have that seed, you can produce the same 1 million addresses. Armory's algorithm is linear, meaning you start with a seed and I can say, give me the 1,000th address and you can compute that. HD wallets were an extension of that where it can actually create a tree and you have branching. And it's basically as flexible as it can be. Basically, after Armory and Electrum did their deterministic wallets, the community was looking to standardize. They realized there was benefits to having the ability to not only generate new addresses, but also say new wallets, that you can have a single seed that would generate multiple different wallets deterministically, so that theoretically you could maintain 20 wallets of 1 million addresses each and then still all be generated from that seed.
Thanks for explaining
the new
that.
Standardization is much, much more flexible than what Armory has right now, and that is why we're going to implement it. I think the backup features and the watching only wallet capability, the ability to generate the addresses without having the private keys, that's one of the benefits of HD wallets, and they're benefits that we already, that we still have. We just don't have the flexibility to generate multiple wallets and do branching in our algorithm. We don't see it as a major barrier for any of our users at the moment, but certainly we do like the interoperability and the flexibility. We will find ways to exploit that, to make use of that flexibility when we do implement it. But right now, as I said, the core benefits of using the BIP32, the HD wallets, we have all those already.
Oh, you pioneered those. Quick follow-up question. You didn't answer if we could take existing multi-signature arrangements or accounts or wallets using pay-to-script hash addresses and redeem scripts, if those can be imported so we can take advantage of the user interface and workflow capabilities in Armory.
As long as the keys are sorted properly, and by properly, I mean the community has kind of agreed on a way to sort those keys because the sorting does change the address. Mm-hmm. As long as they're sorted alphabetically, so to say, there should be no problem using that. You can take the same public keys, you can plug them into the Armory interface. If you put them in out of order, Armory will reorder them for you. You should have access to those ones that way. It's tough to say for a given scheme without looking at the details of it, how much functionality you would get out of that, because there's other details. If you create a P2SH address, a 3 of 5, using 5 public keys, if you were to import those 5 private keys into Armory and the keys were sorted correctly, you could use Armory the same to do the signing.
Thank you.
Andreas, I don't understand that question that you just asked. Could you dumb it down a little bit and explain it again?
Armory uses some new terminology and organizes multiple keys into a lockbox, which is kind of an abstraction of a multi-signature account. But obviously the multi-signature capability has existed now for over a year. I use multi-signature addresses, which are essentially pay to script hash or P2SH addresses. These are addresses that start with a 3 instead of a 1. And those are special Bitcoin addresses that represent a script. And in this particular case, they represent a multisig script, which requires more than one signature in order to redeem. I already use those in practice. Now, creating transactions for those and signing for those is complicated. You have to use the Bitcoin core client. You have to use a command line interface, or there are a couple of JavaScript implementations that will do it for you. And it's pretty nerdy and kludgy and difficult to use. Armory now has a better user interface for doing all of that, but these addresses already exist. So my question was, can I import the constituent keys of those addresses and reuse them within the better workflow and interface of Armory?
Ah, gotcha.
And the answer was yes, if you sort them correctly.
Yes. So keep in mind that the script that is used for pay to script hash address is a script that is hashed and produces that address that starts with a 3. So if you put the keys in a different order, when you hash that, obviously the hashing algorithm will produce a completely different output, which will produce a completely different address. Same keys, same scheme, 2 of 3, for example, signature scheme. But if instead of keys A, B, C, you list them as, BAC or CBA or CAB, that's going to produce 3 different payments addresses, all of which are unlocked by the same keys. But obviously that's going to cause some confusion in the interface.
If I have, say, a 7-part multisig, would that still be an address that starts with a 3?
Yes, 3 simply is the prefix that's given to a pay to script hash address, which is either a multisig or actually can be any type of Bitcoin script, which can encode much more complex redemption criteria or constraints. The multi-signature is the most common use of those, and the 3 doesn't mean anything about the number of signatures or what the script is.
I tend to think of it as the the addresses that start with 1 are your standard single signature addresses that have been in use since the beginning of Bitcoin. And the 3 addresses are kind of a little wrap around everything else. That basically anything else that anyone is going to ever do with Bitcoin that's more complex than just a regular single signature address will end up starting with a 3. And multisig happens to be the most general, the most common and expected use case of those types of addresses. But in the future, if we start to see more contracts or more complex things with Bitcoin, and someone says, hey, I want you to pay me, and they have some crazy thing going on. They've, got 27 people who need to sign different things, or certain contract types. You'll just see that address with a 3 in front of it.
Just for fun, I've created a multi-signature vanity address, which is a pay-to-script hash that starts with a 3 and it spells 3 Andreas. But again, that's actually a single signature, but it just looks funny. So you can do some very interesting things with that technology.
LTB Coin is the official community rewards program of the LTB network. You can earn LTBC by performing any of a number of things that you probably already do. If you listen to shows like this, listen up for the magic word. When you hear it, visit letstalkbitcoin.com, log into your free account, and enter the magic word to claim your share of the listener reward. Beyond that, you can read and comment on fresh daily articles or even contribute articles or shows of your own to be part of the Creator Rewards program, where you receive LTB Coin twice. Once for producing something good enough for LTB to want to publish it, and again 4 weeks later when the performance of your piece is compared against all others released during that same time. And of course, we've got our technical team. If you're a developer, you might be interested in our upcoming Coins for Commits program. As the platform goes open source in the coming weeks, we'd really like to have as much help as possible, and you'll receive LTBC for your time. If you have any questions, send an email to adam@letstalkbitcoin.com, and I'll help you find the person you need to speak to. What can you do with LTBC? Lots of things, but mostly you can do what you want. LTBC is a token, just like Bitcoin, so while we might suggest things for you to do, there are no restrictions we can actually enforce. No warranties or promises either, though. This is an experiment, but so far it's going pretty well. Speaking of suggested uses, today's episode, in addition to our LTBC sponsors, is brought to you by CryptoKit. CryptoKit is a web wallet that installs right into your Chrome browser, so it's always there when you need it. And this really isn't a line. I bought some lighting from Overstock.com and some crazy 16-outlet industrial power strips from Newegg about a week ago. I've been doing LTB for over a year now, and with all the tips we've received, I probably have more transactions under my belt than about 99% of Bitcoin users, but I really can't emphasize how easy it is to pay with CryptoKit. You follow instructions on the vendor page to buy with Bitcoin. It shows you an address with the amount and without even changing tabs, like to pull up your web browser or a desktop wallet. You click the CryptoKit browser shortcut, the address and amount show up as a suggestion, click it, the information is auto-populated. If it's correct, press the send button, and in about 10 seconds, your payment will be confirmed by BitPay or Coinbase. It's ridiculously convenient and really emphasizes to me how it should have been this way all along, instead of asking me to transmit credit card information. You know the story. Check it out at cryptokit.com. That's KRYPTOKIT.com. For today's LTB Coin sponsors, today's high watermark at 72,000 is Lauren Ratcliffe at Lauren Ratcliffe. That's LaurenRatcliff.com. She's an animator, artist, and does some very interesting stop motion work too. From her About page, quote, Lauren Ratcliffe is a queer cyborg. She has a disturbing obsession with drawing curvy ladies and the cat ghosts that haunt them. The cat ghost empire is upon us, end quote. I hadn't actually heard the term cat ghost before, but it's an interesting and major stylistic element in many of her pieces. On the ever so slightly adult language shop page at laurenratcliffe.com, you'll find stickers for $3, cards for $7, cat ghost earrings, and a wolf girl necklace for $12 and $15 respectively. She also has a number of large black and white prints available from Ghostly Girl at $15 to Big Thighs and Ghost Bikes at $40. Taking a look at the stop motion menu option, her reel is worth a watch too. If you're looking for animation support, she's doing very cool work. And of course, she accepts Bitcoin. So Big Thighs, cat ghosts, and Bitcoin support. If you'd like to support our sponsors in the Bitcoin economy, check out laurenratcliffe.com. It's time for the magic word. Today's magic word is armor. That's armor. 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 You've got until Wednesday the 6th of August to visit letstalkbitcoin.com and submit the magic words for your share of the LTB listener rewards. Today's second LTBC sponsor at 60,250 LTBC is HiveWallet.com. The copy on their page is actually good enough that I'd just like to read you a little bit of that. Hive is a human-friendly digital token wallet for multiple platforms, end quote, although it feels especially suited for mobile devices. Quote, why use Hive? You can get started in seconds and access your wallet from any device, and unlike hosted wallets, the new Hive doesn't store your coins on a server anywhere. With just your passphrase, you can access your coins from most mobile and desktop browsers. There's no need to back up your wallet, just your passphrase. Writing it down and keeping it safe or storing it in a password vault is essential. If you lose it, you'll lose your coins. Hive is secure. It's an HD or hierarchical deterministic wallet. It supports multiple tokens, right now Bitcoin and Litecoin, but more in the works. And they've introduced a new feature called Waggle. Waggle attempts to solve the problem of Bitcoin addresses being clunky and terrible to deal with. When you're ready to make a trade, you turn on Waggle and essentially broadcast your public address to other Hive users looking at such data. The person you want to trade with can easily pick out your address with no need to transfer anything, generate QR codes, or use cameras. It's been great to watch Wendell's project and the team supporting it grow over the last year. I can't wait to see what comes next. If you'd like to learn more, check them out at hivewallet.com. So that's it. Head over to letstalkbitcoin.com to enter your magic word, did you catch it? And to join the conversation in our forums by clicking the community tab. One of the things that I wanted to do with Armory was to run some of like a web store off of it or something like that. And when we were talking about this last week, I was really pleased to hear that this is something that you guys have thought about and are planning on.
Following up on what I said earlier about putting some more focus on the corporate and enterprise environment, exactly as you said, businesses that want to leverage Armory, not just for super high security savings that they're going to sign once a month and manually manage those keys. They want to be able to run services, Armory, much like they use with Bitcoin D. And Armory D is the capability to do that. It's the API, meaning it's basically a programmatic version of Armory that doesn't have a GUI, that instead of accessing with mouse clicks and typing on a keyboard, you access it through network services and through other applications on the computer. And you can automate various features like, for instance, creating wallets and generating addresses and verifying the payments came in. You know, if you're running an exchange that's receiving 1,000 payments a day, you can't have someone sitting there manually looking through and verifying that all of them happened. Armory D is just like Bitcoin D. The D stands for daemon. It's a service that runs in the background and you connect to it programmatically. That is what you use when you want to integrate the Bitcoin features or the Armory features into your application, into your web server, into your web store, or anything of the sort. I started the company. We had a version of Armory D, but it had been severely neglected because there wasn't a lot of demand for it. now that we have more people involved in the organization, we have more developers, and we're focusing more on enterprise users and power users. That has definitely made priority. And I think since about 6 months ago, Armory D has maybe doubled or even tripled in size, as we've put a lot of focus on making sure that all the functionality that's available in the GUI and the user interface is also available programmatically through Armory D. And along with that is all the testing and robustness features of that, making sure that anything that you would want to do with that you know you can do in the interface, you can also do with Armory D.
So, Alan, you talked a bit about Armory D offering some feature functionality parity with Bitcoin D, which is the Bitcoin Core client. One of the controversies that has erupted lately and is in discussion a lot is the fact that a weakness in Bitcoin D for many developers, especially those running large commercial merchant or wallet applications, is that you can't monitor the unspent transaction output set if you don't have the address within the Bitcoin wallet, which makes it very unwieldy for running services on top of it or building a platform on top of it. Have you taken a different approach with Armory D? Can it build a completely arbitrary UTXO set for running a platform on top of it?
The version of Armory D that we have right now simply mimics the user interface, and it attempts to provide you all the same features. Where in the interface, you're tracking a set of wallets, and if you want to track a new address or a new wallet, you're going to have to go back through and rescan the blockchain to recollect the history and the unspent outputs for those wallets so that you know how to spend the money. However, one of the things that we've been focusing on the last couple of months is upgrading Armory D, not just Armory D, but basically the engine underlying both the GUI and Armory D, to have something that we call Supernode, which is something that can actually track the entire blockchain all at once. And it's something we've wanted to do for a while, and it's something that we expect will be in high demand in the future, meaning that you build one master database and you'll be able to use it much like a block explorer, where you can just go to a block explorer and type in an address like block explorer blockchain.info. You just type in an address and see the entire history of that address and its balance and what coins have been spent. And that's something that Bitcoin D doesn't have. And currently Armory doesn't have it either, but we expect that in the next month or two, we'll actually be finished with that. And then we'll have the capability for users, corporate users, to put one of these Armory Supernodes on their network running Armory D, and they can run all their services off of it, all their Bitcoin related services.
Why would someone need to be able to monitor the unspent transaction outputs?
One reason would be that you're handling lots of money, or you're handling transactions from lots of people that you don't trust, and you want to be able to quickly verify that coins have been spent, even though you haven't been. Someone sends you money or they send you a transaction, you're not sure whether perhaps they've exploited something or injected data into your network, and you just want as clear full picture of the network as possible. And to understand that everything is kosher when you see data, sometimes you want to query Armory D or Bitcoin D to get that information. And right now, both Armory D and Bitcoin D don't have that full picture. They can give you a slice of it. You would use some of these people use a service like blockchain.info, which is a web page. You can go look this stuff up. They actually integrate that into their service. So their service, when it needs to verify that coins that they received are actually valid, they actually contact blockchain.info. And what we'd like is for them to have, this server that has 100% of the picture, that has all that capability for them to be able to do everything internally without depending on a third-party service.
Right. So this allows them to be completely self-reliant, basically. So like if we were running like 20 different stores on the LTB network or something like that, then they can all essentially reference this one as the equivalent. Because right now we are plugged into blockchain.info and using their API in order to pull this sort of information whenever we need it. We would just run one of these nodes on one of our own servers or a server that we rent, and then everything would just reference that, and we would know that it's trusted because we manage it.
Yeah, the other example is if you're running a service that offers, for example, wallets, either custodial wallets or multi-signature wallets, and you want your customers to be able to create transactions. Well, in order to create transactions, you need to collect unspent transaction outputs for all of their wallets. Right now, you can't do that and use Bitcoin D as your network interface to the rest of the Bitcoin network without importing every single one of your customers' keys into the Bitcoin D wallet in order for it to be able to collect the unspent transaction outputs they have. So it forces you to use the wallet on the Bitcoin Core client, which is actually a pretty poor implementation, and even the developers suggest against using it. If you want to use the database features to look up things on the blockchain that correspond to addresses, you have to have that address in the wallet. And that's a weakness. It's become a big controversy because it makes it very difficult for people to build platform services on top of the Bitcoin Core reference.
Andreas, this is the hairball problem that we've talked about before, right? Where because Bitcoin, the core implementation of Bitcoin is one solid piece that you can't use anything in a vacuum from all of the other pieces, it creates these issues.
That's part of it, is a lack of modularity within the implementation itself, which, by the way, is obviously getting better all the time and has gotten significantly better in the past. But it also has to do with priorities. There's a limited number of developers developing on Bitcoin Core. They each have their own priorities and desires, and some things that a lot of people want but aren't part of the Bitcoin Core developer group simply don't get prioritized. Of course, the answer to that is if you want it, develop it yourself. But, there's all kinds of conflicts and difficulties in deciding exactly what the priorities should be. As with any open source project, this is not, unique to Bitcoin, of course.
Okay, so I'm curious to hear the picture painted of how someone would run a web store using this new Armory D.
Technically, you could do it right now with the existing wallets. It's just that the existing implementation won't handle, 200,000 addresses. But smaller web shops, as some are actually using it right now. Let me go through a sample of how someone might use Armory D from the start. What they're going to do is they're going to create two wallets. One of them is going to be a hot wallet, and one of them is going to be a cold wallet. And what they're going to do is they're going to put the hot wallet on the server, which is going to hold a very little amount of money. Basically enough to process very tiny transactions or small refunds. And then they're going to put a watching only copy of their offline wallet on there, or handling the majority of money that's coming in. The idea is that the signing authority for the bulk of their money remains offline. And in the future, we'll also be adding multisig to this picture. But for right now, you would have an online and an offline wallet, and the web server would simply be able to monitor the funds in the wallet by using Armory D. Their service will be able to talk to Armory D and say, I have a customer who wants to send us money for a payment. Please give me a new payment address. And Armory D will then go to the wallet and grab the next address to distribute to that customer so that they can pay. And after the customer has paid, Armory D will be able to tell them that transaction was received. How many confirmations does it have? They can query information about that transaction, and then they can continue to run their web shop to take subsequent actions to ship out the merchandise or so forth. The benefit of that is that they can actually receive all their payments directly to an offline wallet, but they still have the capability to distribute, to collect money, and verify that money came in without putting the keys to the kingdom on that web server, which may not be so secure.
Is this something that exchanges do or could do?
I believe that at least the bigger exchanges have all come up with their own implementation of this. Something that does similar, and perhaps because Bitcoin D wasn't sufficient and Armory D hadn't been mature, I think a lot of exchanges and other platforms have built their own solutions for doing this. And one of our goals is to actually now make Armory D as flexible and extensible as possible so that companies can save themselves a lot of effort and not reinvent the wheel and simply use ours.
Yeah, there's some risk involved in delegating these types of tasks to exchanges because it creates centralization, and because in many cases these implementations are not trustless. The whole point of doing it with your own installation of Bitcoin is because everything is independently verified. Your trust is based on having a full copy of the blockchain and being able to verify transactions rather than placing trust in a third party. If you delegate that responsibility to a third party, in many cases, you're trusting that third party, and concentrating trust in third parties takes us down the road we've been before and ends in tears.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting to delegate it. I was just asking if that was something that exchanges did, or like, how do they operate now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it's important to point out that in many cases, that is exactly what happens, because it's too difficult to do on your own, people do delegate that, and they delegate it in a trusting way to a third party, an exchange perhaps. And if that third party is handling all of those things, then in many cases, putting the trust in that third party, it's a dangerous precedent, and it creates centralization. So it's important to look at solutions like HarmonyD and better solutions for decentralization, which allow you to have trustless verification of the blockchain on your own infrastructure, completely independent of other parties.
And this is the classic, merchant customer scenario where the customer might be able to wire their own house or replace outlet, something like that, but risks involved. They can get it done, and they can go watch YouTube videos and spend some time learning about it, but they're not going to do it as well as someone whose life is devoted to these things. And I would say the same thing about, the way Armory is approaching this, is that a lot of these companies can go hire people and train them to learn about how the network works and how to aggregate unspent outputs and monitor balances. But you're not necessarily going to end up with something that's as robust as you want it to be, especially when you handle lots of money. When you look at the malleability issues that happened, I think 6 months ago, Mt. Gox, not just Mt. Gox, but a couple services complained that there was issues caused by the malleability. That is something that Armory actually didn't have a problem with. We had already thought about stuff like that. And similarly, offline transactions, there's actually some very subtle attacks that if someone controls the online computer, they can trick the offline computer into believing it's signing something that it isn't. And again, Armory is our goal. I mean, we've been doing this for years. We've thought about those things, and we've done it in a secure way. And while you can hire some people and teach them about Bitcoin and try to get them, build your own solution, it's very much like they say about cryptography in general. Don't go roll your own, because although strictly speaking it might work, you then become vulnerable to timing attacks and all sorts of, nasty things that only someone who's spent many years in the field would really understand.
So we're coming to the end of this conversation. Alan, I want to thank you again for taking the time to explain this to us. I'm really looking forward to seeing more of the multisig stuff roll out. I want to talk about Armory as a project and Armory as an open source project specifically. We've seen a lot of wallets come into the space. Most of them are not download and put it on your computer wallets. Most of them are turning into these sort of hosted service wallets. And even, they don't necessarily keep your keys. So there isn't that attack vector quite so much as there used to be with some of the older web wallet styles. But it definitely seems like this full node, download the whole blockchain and really control everything is not something that is being developed in the way that you are, except by you guys. What do you think about that? What's the experience been like? And how is it operating in this space as an open source company?
That's partially a reason why we focused on the corporate side. One, because there's demand for it. And two, because what we've built is something that is every day becoming less and less a tool for regular new users. When you talk about downloading the blockchain, today, if you use just Bitcoin Core, it takes, 3 days. If you use Armory, we actually implemented a BitTorrent download to speed it up to, 4 hours. We could spend time optimizing that and trying to make that particular part of the user experience easier. But in the end, the corporate customers, that's not something that's really relevant to them. They have the time to go download the blockchain and set everything up and work through those barriers to entry. If we were going to focus more on a consumer-facing side, for people who are new to Bitcoin to be introduced through Armory, we would be spending a lot of our focus right now on a light version of Armory and a mobile version, and perhaps some kind of web app or some kind of bridge to make these features accessible. Now, that's not to say that we will not do this, but the fact is that with our limited amount of resources, what we're looking at is right now we have a very strong enterprise offering. So right now, we're going to capitalize on that. We don't have to compromise with any of our kind of ideals to do that. We'll still be completely open source, and all the features that we develop will still go into the free product that you download, and we're committed to doing that. It's simply very much like Red Hat, Ubuntu, many of the other open source projects that you see. You can go download a copy of MongoDB and use it to your heart's content, however you want. But many people go ahead and pay for contracts with the company that develops MongoDB, for support, help integrate into their process, troubleshooting, so forth. And I think that's one of the directions that we're going to go in the short term as we develop that, especially once we have things like Supernode completed. We'll then have a better path to creating more consumer products. For instance, being able to run our own supernode and have light nodes connect to it. That'll open up an easier path for us to provide a mobile wallet and to provide, a light version of Armory. It's just not quite on our priority list at the moment.
But if people would like to learn more about the company Armory, or if they'd like to learn more, just get involved with the software, since this is an open source project, where should they go? Who should they contact?
BitcoinArmory.com is our website. And if you're interested in contacting us, just for whatever reason, you can just email contact@bitcoinarmory.com. And if you are a company that's looking to get involved with Bitcoin and with Armory, we now have enterprise@bitcoinarmory.com, which is a channel that we've opened up for businesses that want to get, they're investigating using Armory as their platform. You can contact us there to discuss options with us.
And just as a final thought, I do want to mention we didn't have time here to get to the extension suite, but Alan, can you kind of just really briefly talk about what type of user that's for?
So the extensions is not something that we anticipate regular users will use much. What it simply does is it allows us a way to extend the core code of Armory. This isn't something where you open up Armory and you're going to see 30 extensions, some of which are enabled by default. It's really a mechanism for us, especially with corporate clients, to be able to provide them features customized to them. For instance, creating certain types of reports, or reporting, auditing, compliance issues, various encryption options, web of trust options. Basically, customize a part of Armory to them without bundling everything into a single code base, so that we can continue to keep Armory itself open source and free, and all the core of it available for regular users for free. But when they use Armory, they would use that same version, but they'd simply hire us to write them something that integrates Armory into their platform, and we can provide that to them as a couple files that they just drop into their execution directory.
Alan, are there any exciting things that are in the immediate future for Armory? And as Armory users, any things that we should be looking forward to?
I think Multisig is the most exciting. That's something that we've wanted to do for a long time, and now we've done it. I think that the new wallets are going to be a big deal. We haven't finished those yet, and they're going to come out after Multisig, and we will adapt our Multisig solution to using those. But we'll be able to do all sorts of new stuff, compressed public keys that will allow you to go up to 15 of 15, new encryption options, new backup options. There's a lot of cool stuff coming with that, and we anticipate that Multisig is what's going to be our focus in the immediate future, as there's very high demand for that. And then the new wallets will allow us interoperability with other clients, as well as a host of convenience features, and for instance, the ability to generate multiple wallets and back them all up with one seed.
Thanks for listening to episode 132 of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Content for today's show is provided by Alan Reiner, Stephanie Murphy, Andreas M. Antonopoulos, and Adam B. Levine. This episode was edited by Adam B. Levine. Music for today's show is provided by Jared Rubens and General Fuzz. Here are some quick stats from the LTB Coin program. From July 6th to August 1st, we saw 1,356 articles and show comments, 155 new forum threads, 2,289 new forum replies, 9,501 newly viewed content. That's a metric that we've made that basically only counts once per person. 205 newly registered and configured users, 1,303 magic words correctly submitted, 1,002 posts that were liked, and a total of 799 users participated and split about 1.6 million LTB coin. If you still haven't signed up, head over to letstalkbitcoin.com, and to learn more, hit ltbcoin.com. Have a good one.